In the Rust Belt, where steel and glass factories once blazed like the beating heart of the town, only ruins and weeds remain. The old glassworks still stands, brick walls stained and crumbling, windows shattered, like a lone tombstone rising among dead streets. People still whisper about the accident that happened there, a worker trapped inside the furnace when it exploded. Nothing was left but ash and a charred mask. Yet they believe his screams fused into the molten glass, haunting the place forever. No one dares linger too long, but the factory remains, silent, as if waiting for the next soul to step inside and catch their reflection in the fractured glass. Nisin. Evelyn returned to the town on a grey afternoon, the sun smothered by thick clouds, the streets so empty they seemed to have forgotten human breath. She walked slowly, each step measuring the distance of a lost childhood. This town had once lived by the glow of its furnaces, by the sound of molten glass poured into molds. Now it breathed only rusted metal and the dust of decay. Beside her walked Mark, who had never left this place. Hardened, aged, his eyes bore the wear of a lifetime tied to factories long dead. Behind them, Sam, Evelyn's grandson, stepped quickly, his sneakers crunching on shards of glass scattered along the pavement. He had no memories of this town, only curiosity for the abandoned glassworks whispered about in rumors. From afar, the factory loomed like the carcass of a stranded leviathan. Blackened brick walls, rust-stained sheet metal roofs, windows gaping like hollow sockets. The remaining shards caught the fading light, scattering it into jagged reflections, making the entire structure resemble a corpse stripped bare to its bones. As they drew closer, a figure hunched beneath a power pole came into view. A homeless man, his coat ragged, his hair matted into clumps, his dull eyes fixed on them, lips moving as if muttering some secret prayer. A chill ran through Evelyn. But when she blinked, the man was gone, swallowed by emptiness, leaving only the acrid scent of ash and a rolling bottle of liquor. The factory's main door hung ajar, its hinges shrieking a rusted trumpet as the wind pressed against it. Sam pushed it open, letting daylight spill into the suffocating dark beyond. Evelyn hesitated, inhaling sharply before stepping through the threshold. At once, the air changed, thick with sulfur and smoke, dry as sand filling her lungs. Inside, stray light streamed through broken windows, scattering into clouds of dust adrift in the gloom. Beneath their feet, thousands of shards cracked faintly with each step, a fragile warning. Rusted iron tables lay smothered in ash, glass-blowing molds sprawled like hollowed corpses. Jagged panes stood upright, fractured, their reflections twisting the three figures into distorted shadows that danced across the dark. Sam led the way, his flashlight carving a sharp path through the black, shards glittering like crystal. Evelyn followed slowly, her body weighed down by invisible heaviness. Each time the beam swung away, the darkness pressed in behind her, thick, suffocating. Mark walked silently at the rear, one hand trailing along the cold wall, as if searching for stability in the growing unease. The deeper they moved, the hotter the air grew. Not the muggy heat of the afternoon, but a dry, searing breath, as though the furnace still smoldered somewhere within. Sweat prickled Evelyn's skin, yet when she wiped it away, her palm burned as if she had touched heated iron. At the center of the hall, the furnace towered, blackened, scarred. Its gaping mouth yawned like a wound that refused to heal. There was no fire, yet waves of oppressive heat pulsed from its walls. Around its charred mouth, dark handprints marred the brick, warped, grotesque. Evelyn blinked, and for a moment she swore they twitched, struggling to claw their way out. A faint sound stirred. Glass cracking. Sam swept his beam toward it. The light struck a tall pane of glass, thick and fractured, where a handprint pressed clear against the inside. Translucent, full, alive, vines faintly visible beneath its pale surface. Evelyn froze, heart hammering. Mark stepped back half a pace, eyes tense. The hand didn't move. Then in a blink it vanished, leaving only a smooth reflection, their faces blurred, stretched, distorted. The silence in the factory tightened, as if the building itself held its breath. And somewhere, very faint, the sound returned. A brittle crack, like human bones shattering within frozen crystal. Now, the air inside the factory grew heavier, thicker. Evelyn could feel the heat radiating from the walls, as though the entire building breathed slowly. Each exhale, a scorching wave pressed against her skin. She paused, trying to draw in a breath, but her chest seared, filled only with the stench of ash and the acrid burn of sulfur. Sam kept moving forward, his flashlight trembling across rows of rusted tables. Scattered on their surfaces lay old, glass-blowing tools, broken, cracked, coated in layers of dust. On one table rested a glassblower's mask, split in two. Its eye shield was blackened with soot, the surface fractured as though it had once exploded under unbearable heat. Mark picked it up, the beam of Sam's light refracting through the cracks into jagged rays, like the half-open eye of something long dead. He set it back down, but the clatter echoed unnaturally long, as if it were being hurled back from deep inside the furnace's core. Another sound stirred, a stretched, distorted moan, like a voice groaning from within the brick walls. Evelyn turned sharply, but no one was there. For a fleeting instant, she imagined the sound wasn't coming from outside at all, but from the very sheets of glass towering around them. The whole chamber seemed like a colossal lung, each pane exhaling waves of suffocating heat. Sam stopped before a tall pane leaning against the wall. The glass was hazy, yet the reflection staring back at him was no longer his own. His skin appeared translucent, gelatinous, with veins glowing like blood-soaked crystal. He raised his hand to the surface, and instantly, the pane rippled like water under a fingertip. Evelyn and Mark froze, horrified, as Sam's reflection slowly turned its head, while the real Sam stood motionless. The air glowed suddenly, eerily, as though a furnace somewhere had just roared back to life. On the brick walls, faint crimson light spilled upward, stretching their shadows into grotesque forms that mingled with shapes not belonging to any of them. Evelyn's eyes fixed on a figure staggering in the distance. Tall, body veined with glowing cracks, like molten glass splitting from within. Its eyes burned red, twin coals piercing the dark. The silence was so absolute that even a heartbeat struck like a hammer on metal. Then came a sharp, splintering crack, deafening through the chamber. A glass jar exploded on one of the tables, shards bursting outward, yet instead of falling, they hovered in the air for several seconds, before clattering to the floor with a shrill resonance that dragged on unnaturally long. Evelyn suddenly realized one presence was missing. The homeless man who had lingered near the factory was nowhere to be seen. She scanned the room and spotted, in a corner, a ragged coat slung across a broken chair. On the floor beneath it, glass fragments were smeared with congealed blood, glistening red, frozen into crystalline streaks. No body remained, only shards and blood, trapped inside the glass like a jewel. The floor beneath Evelyn quivered faintly, as if some vast machine had stirred awake below them after decades of silence. The clicking sounds came in sequence, like a spectral rhythm tapped across thousands of shards. Mark pressed forward, jaw clenched, but each step of his boots rang out like bones splintering. The flashlight beam swung across leaning panes where dozens of faces emerged faintly. It was impossible to tell if they were reflections or people entombed within. Their eyes bulged wide, mouths frozen open in a voiceless scream, bodies transparent, sculpted in glass. Evelyn raised a trembling hand to her lips, smothering the scream that clawed her throat. What she saw was not only a haunting, but a warning of what awaited them. At the far end, the heat thickened, searing. In the red glow, the cracked figure still stood, unmoving, like a living statue. And when Evelyn blinked, it was gone, leaving only a glowing void in the factory's oppressive dark, each breath of heat rising like fire against her neck. Nay. I know. The air inside the factory grew so dense, it felt tangible. Evelyn stepped back, her hand gripping the edge of a rusted iron table. The heat pouring from the walls grew more intense, as if she were standing beside an immense fire. Yet in the quivering beam of the flashlight, there was nothing but darkness and the still slabs of glass towering around them. Sam stood before a large pane, and the face reflected back was no longer the familiar 19-year-old boy. His skin had become translucent, fragile like thin glass, with veins glimmering dark red, snaking across his body like fractures in crystal. Every movement produced a faint sound, the brittle creak of glass straining under pressure. Evelyn saw his body tremble as countless tiny cracks spread from within. Mark lunged forward to pull Sam away, but his touch met a skin as cold as the surface of ice. His palm left a foggy imprint on Sam's transparent arm, which vanished as soon as he let go. Sam panted, his chest rising and falling, each breath punctuated by a sharp crack, as though his ribs were being compressed inside a glass mold. From the shadows, another sound arose. A series of clicks, then silence. Evelyn lifted her head and realized they were no longer alone. Figures emerged from the dark, standing motionless in different corners of the workshop. They resembled statues more than humans, bodies transparent, faces frozen in expressions of horror, eyes wide open, mouths agape in voiceless screams. Some were cracked through, their forms webbed with fractures. Others still moved faintly, a stiff turn of the head or a jerking arm, each motion accompanied by the painful groan of breaking glass. Evelyn longed to close her eyes, but she couldn't look away. Each statue bore the shape of a real person, some clad in work overalls, some small as children, even the figure of a woman with long tangled hair, her face locked in terror. All of them imprisoned in eternal crystal, a transparent tomb. Mark, struggling to steady himself, approached a statue of a male worker standing near an old furnace bench. He reached out to touch it. In an instant, the statue shattered into thousands of shards, spraying across the floor. Within the broken shell was a charred, crumbling skeleton. Its skull rolled, striking the ground with a hollow clack. Evelyn screamed hoarsely as ashen glass dust clouded the air. Through the haze, a tall figure emerged, broad shoulders hunched back, a body like scorched glass riddled with glowing fissures. On his distorted face, 2 burning coals for eyes. In his hand, a long glassblower's tongue, its tips glowing red as though just pulled from the furnace. Evelyn knew instantly who he was, the glassworker who had perished in the explosion. Yet here, he was neither man nor ghost. He was something forged from the disaster itself. Flesh fused with molten glass, a soul melded with fire, a being condemned to haunt the factory forever. The glassmaker moved slowly, but each step made the workshop tremble, punctuated by the brittle shatter of unseen glass. His eyes burned, fixed only on Sam. He raised the tongue, and the suffocating heat rolled like a gust from the furnace mouth. Sam staggered, his legs cracking with each step, fractures spreading like roots along his transparent skin. Evelyn rushed forward to pull him away, but his body was already being drawn into the glass wall behind him. He clawed at it, face contorted, mouth open in a scream that never escaped. The wall softened, swallowing him whole. His hands thrashed in desperation, carving deep cracks into the pane. Mark shouted voicelessly, slamming his fists against the wall, but it only shuddered harder. Evelyn saw Sam's face blur behind the surface, his bloodshot eyes bulging wide, until his entire form vanished into the glass. His strangled scream reverberated, echoing across the workshop, multiplying through every pane surrounding them. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the noise. The glassmaker halted, tilting his head, as though listening to the fracture of a newly captured soul. And in that instant, Evelyn understood. He wasn't merely hunting intruders. He was collecting them, turning each into a living statue, adding them to his eternal gallery within the dead glassworks. Darkness consumed the space, leaving Evelyn and Mark surrounded by the silent statues, their glassy eyes following their every move. And deep within the panes, Evelyn saw Sam's eyes still open, locked on her, pleading from the other side of his transparent prison. Now, the factory sank into a crushing silence. Evelyn and Mark stood back to back, the flashlight trembling in their hands as its beams swept across the room. The crystal statues remained motionless, yet their transparent eyes seemed to track every subtle movement. And in the center, the towering shadow of the glassmaker loomed, his chest rising and falling as though still filled with the breath of a fire long extinguished. A low hum rose, deep and heavy, vibrating through the concrete beneath their feet. Evelyn realized it came from the far end of the workshop, the old furnace. The circular steel pit, rusted and thought long dead, now glowed a searing red, as though a colossal heart had begun to beat again. Waves of blistering air surged outward, carrying the stench of scorched metal and tar. Mark seized Evelyn's arm, urging retreat, but the massive glass panes along the walls slid into place, cutting off every exit. They rearranged themselves into jagged partitions, reflecting endless duplicates of their figures. Evelyn saw dozens of her own trembling images, all trapped in the crimson glare like imprisoned phantoms. A crack resounded, then another. The statues began to stir, slowly, deliberately. Some twisted their heads, revealing fissures that gleamed beneath their crystalline skin. Others raised stiff arms, their joints snapping with metallic clicks. Each movement birthed the brittle sound of splintering glass, swelling into a grotesque chorus. Evelyn felt it then. The glassmaker had no intention of killing them outright. He meant to herd them toward the furnace, toward the final fire. A ritual, a recreation of the accident that had forged him. He dragged his long tongs across the floor, the shriek of metal sparking a thin trail of fire. Evelyn glimpsed Mark's face, jaw clenched, eyes wide, His strength eroded into a child's trembling fear. Step by step, they were forced back toward the furnace. The air thickened, the heat so intense it evaporated their sweat the moment it touched their skin. Each breath felt like swallowing shards of glass. Evelyn coughed violently, but clung to Mark's arm to stay upright. And then she saw Sam. In the glass wall to the left, his face emerged clearly, eyes burning red, skin fractured into jagged shards. Sam pounded on the surface, but no sound escaped. Only the sharp spreading of cracks answered him. His mouth opened in a scream, his throat straining, and Evelyn heard a faint echo within her mind. "Help me!" The sight nearly buckled her knees, but the glassmaker allowed no pause. He swung his tongs, and a blast of furnace wind hurled them sprawling before the fiery maw. The furnace's red light bathed their faces, and Evelyn's tear-filled eyes reflected like fractured crystal. Mark struggled to his feet, pulling Evelyn up, but a crystalline hand clamped around his ankle. A worker statue, its frozen eyes locked wide, dragged him backward. Mark kicked desperately, shattering it to pieces, but 3 more statues blocked the way, their arms stretching like jagged glass branches. Evelyn's gaze swept the room, and dread hollowed her chest. They were encircled, hemmed in by a tightening ring of living statues. Each crackling fracture echoed like a drumbeat, driving them closer to the furnace. The glassmaker raised his tongs high, lowering them slowly in a solemn gesture. This was no impulsive strike. It was judgment, a ritual sacrifice. The furnace's glow reflected across his body, illuminating the molten lines coursing through his cracked flesh like lava veins in transparent stone. In that moment, Evelyn understood. He intended to melt them down in the fire, to recast them as eternal crystal effigies, silent additions to his growing army within the factory. A sharp crack thundered above. Evelyn looked up to see a rusted steel beam giving way, the massive pane of glass suspended from it swaying wildly. Instinct screamed. This was their only chance. With every ounce of strength, she lunged at Mark, dragging him aside just as the enormous pane came crashing down. The impact shook the entire workshop. Glass exploded outward in a storm of glittering shards, slicing into their skin. The glassmaker staggered, his burning eyes swirling with fury. Bleeding but resolute, Evelyn and Mark struggled to their feet. Behind the furnace, she glimpsed a narrow gap, an old passage blocked by steel panels. If they could reach it, they might escape the circle. But to get there, they would have to go through the glassmaker. He turned toward them, each fissure on his body trembling as though ready to burst. Behind him, the furnace blazed brighter than ever, its flames howling for more souls. And Evelyn knew then, the final act of the nightmare was upon them. Oh, aye. The roar of the furnace thundered like a colossal heartbeat, relentless, demanding. Evelyn and Mark ran in desperation, the searing heat clawing at their backs. The narrow gap behind the furnace was only a few meters away, but the glassmaker blocked the way, his body glowing red like a mirror forged from fire. Mark did not stop. He charged straight at the creature, his bare hands slamming into its crystalline chest. A piercing crack echoed, shards splintering deep into his flesh. Yet he held on, forcing the monster back toward the furnace. Evelyn screamed, her eyes blurred with tears, but Mark never turned. "Run!" His voice was a faint whisper, swallowed by the roar of the flames. Evelyn understood. She turned away and hurled herself toward the gap. The glassmaker shrieked, raising its tongs, but Mark tightened his grip, dragging the creature down with him into the furnace's blazing mouth. Light erupted, the whole chamber igniting in an inferno. For a fleeting instant, Evelyn saw Mark's figure breaking apart, his flesh splintering into burning crystal shards, merging with the blaze. Then he was gone, swallowed along with the monstrous shadow of the glassmaker. Evelyn collapsed, her heart tearing with pain. But the fire did not die. Instead, it raged higher, fed by blood and soul. Cracks tore open along the furnace walls, molten light blazing through, flooding the workshop with searing brilliance. In panic, she crawled toward the gap, scraping her body through. Her hand sliced against a shard of glass, blood streaking crimson. Behind her, a terrible howl shook the air. Not Mark's, not the glassmaker's, but something fused of both. She dragged herself through at last, tumbling into the dry grass outside. The night wind bit cold against her wounds, but still in her ears the sounds echoed, shattering glass, strangled screams, breaking from within the furnace hall. She turned once more. The shattered windows blazed, reflecting hundreds of translucent faces pressed against the glass. Among them, Evelyn saw Mark, his eyes frozen, his mouth gaping in an eternal silent cry. Beside him was Sam, still screaming from behind a fractured pane. The glassworks fell silent again, save for the red glow pulsing from the cracks in its walls. Evelyn lay on the ground, eyes wide, knowing she had escaped, but would never truly be free. For in the night wind, she still heard it. The faint, brittle sound of glass breaking, as if hundreds of hands were pressing from the other side of the mirror, waiting for the day she would return. Noon.